Story 1. The Camp in Black Hollow. This happened in the summer of 2019 at a sleepaway camp deep in the Appalachian Mountains called Camp Black Hollow. I was 13, and it was supposed to be my last year there, the year you get a little more freedom, a little more respect, and way more fun. Camp had always felt like a second home. Bunk beds, campfires, swimming in the lake, and late-night ghost stories. But that summer was different because of Rick. Rick was the new counselor, and from day one, he didn't fit in. He was in his 50s, way older than any other staff member, with gray hair, sun-damaged skin, and this stiff, unnatural way of smiling that never quite reached his eyes. Most of us tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was just one of those older, outdoorsy types who liked working with kids, but the other campers, especially the girls, whispered about him constantly. He stares too long. He walks too quiet. He gives me the creeps. Still, during the first week, Rick acted normal. He helped us clean our bunk, made corny jokes, and seemed overly helpful. It was easy to ignore the weirdness until tennis night. Every few days, we got a free hour after dinner. My friends and I went to the tennis courts, just messing around. It was warm, humid, and the lights buzzed above us as we played. That's when I noticed him. Rick, sitting on a bench at the edge of the court. He wasn't supervising anyone. He wasn't talking, just sitting perfectly still, hands on his knees, grinning. Not a happy grin, more like a frozen mask, wide, locked in place, with cold eyes that didn't blink. He stared straight at us, not moving. My friend whispered, "Why is he smiling like that?" I didn't have an answer. Something about it felt wrong. Later that night, I went to the showers alone. Everyone else had already finished, and I just wanted some quiet. After drying off, I noticed a can of shaving cream on the sink. None of us shaved, we were still kids. I picked it up to look at it. Suddenly, a hand grabbed my arm from behind. It was Rick. He was glaring at me, his voice low and sharp. "You don't touch my stuff, got it?" I couldn't speak. I just nodded, frozen. He leaned closer. "Do it again, and I'll kill you." Then he let go and walked out. I stood there shaking, still in my towel. No one else had heard it. No one else saw him. That was the first time I felt real fear at camp. After that night in the bathroom with Rick, I avoided him like my life depended on it. I didn't tell anyone, not my bunkmates, not the counselors, no one. I was embarrassed, confused, and honestly afraid that no one would believe me. Rick still acted normal around others, helpful, cheerful, like nothing ever happened. But I noticed things. How he always seemed to know where I was. How he'd appear behind the cabin without a sound. How he stopped smiling when he thought no one was watching. By the end of the first week, I barely slept. I waited until the bathrooms were full before showering. And if Rick came near our bunk, I made sure to keep a crowd around me. He didn't touch me again, but I felt his eyes all the time. Then came the second week. It was a Tuesday or Wednesday night. Can't remember exactly, but I know it was movie night at the camp. We watched something silly in the mess hall, then headed back to the cabin afterward. The air was cooler than usual. Still. Too still. Rick wasn't around that night. We were told it was his night off. I felt relieved. Back at the cabin, we got ready for bed. The counselors turned out the lights around 10, and everyone was settling in when it happened. Screaming. It came from somewhere down the trail, loud, high-pitched, and panicked. Girls, maybe 10 of them, all yelling at once. It lasted for about a minute, echoing through the trees. We froze. 2 of our 3 counselors told us to stay put and rushed out toward the sound. The remaining one stayed behind with us. We sat there in the dark, whispering theories: a bear, a prank. But something about those screams was real. An hour passed, then more. The counselors didn't return. By then, we were in our bunks, trying to act normal, but everyone could feel the tension. The next morning at breakfast, We sat with other bunks like usual. A few girls from a younger cabin joined our table, quiet, pale. One of them, maybe 9 or 10 years old, finally spoke. She told us everything. The night before, while their counselors were outside talking, the girls had heard noises coming from their cabin bathroom, like shuffling, breathing. They thought maybe it was an animal or someone playing a prank, so they opened the bottom stall. Rick was inside. After that morning, everything at Camp Black Hollow changed. We weren't told the full story, officially, just that Counselor Rick won't be returning, and that camp security acted quickly. But rumors flew through the cabins like wildfire, and those of us who had seen his face, or heard the screams, didn't need confirmation. We knew. The rest of that day passed like a blur. Activities were canceled. The camp staff was clearly shaken. A few parents even came early to take their kids home. I overheard someone say Rick had been taken away in a squad car around dawn, still grinning, still silent. The younger girls who found him were moved to different cabins. They didn't sleep that night. Honestly, none of us did. I couldn't stop thinking about that moment in the bathroom. The way he grabbed me, his voice, the coldness in it. I didn't say anything then, but now I wished I had. Maybe someone would have listened. Maybe those girls wouldn't have had to see what they saw. That guilt sat heavy. The counselors tried to make things feel normal. They cracked jokes at lunch, held extra canoe races, handed out s'mores like nothing had happened. But it was no use. The magic of camp had died in that bathroom stall. Still, I stayed for the last few days. I didn't want Rick to be the reason I left early. I stayed with my bunkmates, stuck close to the staff I trusted, and kept my eyes on the shadows. Nothing else happened. Rick was gone. No one said his full name. He didn't come back for his things. It was like the woods swallowed him, and everyone wanted to pretend he'd never been there in the first place. On the last day of camp, as we were loading up the buses, I heard someone say he'd been transferred somewhere secure. Maybe an institution, maybe prison. No one was sure. But one thing was clear: he was dangerous, and he'd done this before. You could feel it. The calmness, the planning, the control. I only went back to Camp Black Hollow once more the next summer. By then, most of the staff had changed. The cabins had fresh paint. The schedule was packed tighter, and all the bathroom locks had been replaced. But it didn't feel the same. It never could again. Story 2. The Man from Platform 9. This happened in 2003, in a mid-sized coastal city in northern Oregon called Tide Grove. I was 15, finishing my first year of high school, and I usually took the city bus home after school. That day, for some reason, I walked to the central bus terminal downtown, instead of waiting at the usual stop near my school. I stood by Platform 9, where the number 34 bus picked up. It was quieter than I expected, just a few commuters, and the occasional echo of heels on concrete. After maybe 10 minutes, a man approached me. He looked to be in his late 30s, maybe early 40s, tall, thin, wearing a beige windbreaker and carrying a messenger bag. His hair was slicked back, and he had this too friendly expression, like someone who smiled just a second too long. "Did the 28 already leave?" he asked. I told him, yes. I had just seen it drive off. He nodded, then stuck out his hand. "I'm Jeremy." I hesitated but didn't want to be rude. I shook it and said, "I'm Hannah." That wasn't my real name. He asked if I had just come from school. I said yes. He asked which one. I lied. He asked if I was heading home. I lied again. Just going to a friend's. When my bus finally pulled up, I got on, relieved to get away from him. But then, Jeremy got on too. And that made no sense. He had specifically asked about the 28. Bus 34 and 28 didn't share a single stop past the terminal. If he'd missed his bus, he should have waited for the next one. I sat halfway back. He sat down right next to me. My pulse picked up. He kept asking questions. What grade are you in? Do you have a boyfriend? Are you close with your parents? I lied to every single one. I tried to stay calm. Told myself he was just lonely, harmless, that maybe he didn't realize how creepy he was being. But then I asked, "Where are you headed?" He said, "Home. Last stop." I'd been taking this route all year. There were only 2 of us who got off the bus at that stop. The street was nearly empty. No cars, no people. Just the soft hum of streetlights and the buzz of cicadas. The sun had dipped low enough that everything was painted in that weird, fading orange. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, I felt trapped. I tried to keep calm as I stepped onto the sidewalk, acting like I knew exactly where I was going even though I didn't. I figured I could lose him on foot, maybe duck into a store, or pretend I lived in one of the houses nearby. But he didn't let me get that far. "Where's your friend live?" he asked. "I'm meeting her up the street." He nodded, but I could tell he didn't believe me. His posture changed. He moved closer. "You really shouldn't lie," he said casually, almost like a joke. I tried to laugh it off, but my voice cracked. "You don't need to walk me," I said, more firmly. That's when his whole demeanor shifted. His voice dropped. His smile disappeared. "Shut up," he said. "Just walk." His hand landed heavy on my shoulder. Not squeezing, just resting, but it sent my body into full panic mode. My brain scrambled. I couldn't scream, couldn't cry, couldn't run. He leaned in, breath hot against my ear. "If you're good, you don't have to be scared." My legs were shaking. I felt my knees threaten to buckle. "I'm not scared," I lied. "Good," he said. "Say it properly." "I'll be good." Louder. "I'll be good," I repeated. Louder this time. Then we walked, or rather, I walked, and he kept pace, his hand on me like a leash. I had no idea where I was going. I turned corners blindly, took random streets, trying to lead us somewhere public. But this neighborhood was mostly residential, silent, fenced-off lawns and houses with closed blinds. No one out, no help. My heart was racing so hard it hurt. I started to feel dizzy. My vision blurred at the edges. I thought, I might collapse right here. And then I saw someone. An older man was bent over in his front yard, watering flowers near his porch. He hadn't seen us yet. Something inside me snapped. I pulled away and ran. I didn't think, didn't look back, just ran full speed toward the man in the yard. I vaguely remember screaming, "Help, please," as loud as I could. The man looked up, startled. I think I tripped, maybe collapsed near his fence, because the next thing I remember, clearly, is him rushing toward me, while Jeremy turned and ran the opposite direction, vanishing down the street without another word. The man called the police. I called my parents. By the time officers arrived, Jeremy was long gone. I thought it was over, but it wasn't. After that night, my parents bought me a phone the very next day. Back then, phones weren't something every teenager had, but they didn't care about the cost. They just wanted me safe. I was told never to walk alone again, never to go to the main terminal. From then on, I could only board the bus directly from school. I followed the rules. For weeks, I didn't see Jeremy, but just when I started to breathe again, he came back. I remember the exact moment. It was late fall. I was stepping onto my usual bus, number 34, right outside school. And he was there, already seated, already smiling. That same too wide smile, that same beige jacket. His eyes lit up, like he'd been waiting for me. I froze, didn't sit down, didn't blink, just turned and ran back into the school, heart pounding. I called my mom from the front office, barely able to speak. She picked me up and called the school that same hour. After that, I was escorted by teachers every day. No more buses, no more walks alone. But it didn't stop. Some days, he'd be nearby, on the sidewalk, across the street, Not doing anything illegal. Not close enough to act. But there. Watching. Sometimes 3 days in a row. Sometimes he vanished for weeks. But he always returned. The police couldn't help. He hasn't broken the law, they said. Unless he comes onto school grounds or threatens you, we can't intervene. So we adjusted. I waited inside after school. My mom took longer routes home, always checking the mirrors. My dad refused to talk about it at all. Eventually, the sightings stopped. Maybe he got bored. Maybe he moved on. I graduated, moved away for college, tried to forget. Years passed. Then, one summer, when I was 21 and home for break, I stopped by a grocery store on the other side of town. I turned into the dairy aisle, and there he was. Jeremy. He looked older, grayer, but it was him. He didn't look at me, didn't seem to notice, but I recognized him instantly. I stood frozen for a full minute, heart hammering in my chest. Then I turned around and walked straight out. No one here keeps public records like in some other countries. I never learned his full name. He was never arrested. Never even reported officially. Some say maybe he was just lonely. Mentally unwell. My mom disagrees. She thinks he was something far worse. Someone who planned things. Who knew exactly what he was doing. And I believe her. Even now, I check who's on the bus. Watch sidewalks. Listen for footsteps when I walk alone. I still remember the weight of his hand on my shoulder. And that voice. If you're good. Story 3. He was like family. My husband David had been close with his childhood friend Luke since they were kids in a small Midwestern town called Everpine. When I met Luke, I liked him instantly. He was quiet, kind, and dependable, the kind of person who offered to help move furniture or fix your Wi-Fi without being asked. David and I didn't have much family around, so Luke became part of ours. We spent holidays together, hosted game nights, and shared everything from old sci-fi movies to retro computers. He was practically a brother to us. But Luke had always been private. He'd never dated anyone. Not even once, as far as we knew. He still lived with his parents well into his 30s. Whenever relationships came up, he'd change the subject or give vague answers. Then, out of nowhere, Luke moved away. He said his sister had bought a house in Brookridge, 3 hours away, and since she didn't live there yet, he'd be staying in it alone. It sounded like a good thing. Independence. A fresh start. But after he moved, he went silent. No visits. Rare, short replies to texts. His social media went dark. David reached out several times. Luke would respond with things like, "All's fine. Just settling in. Busy." Months passed. Then a year. David assumed Luke just wanted space. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. So I called him myself. Surprisingly, he answered. He sounded flat but agreed to let us visit. The house was remote, overgrown yard, dusty windows. Inside it felt off, cluttered, dark. PC parts everywhere. His bedroom looked like a teenage boy's room, messy. Wires everywhere. Nothing adult about it. He said his sister came by some weekends and used the main bedroom. "I don't like people touching my stuff," he muttered. We took him to dinner, tried to reconnect, but the way he spoke, it wasn't like before. His replies were short, generic, like he was reading from a script. David finally asked, "Why did you drop off like that?" Luke just smiled and said, "Time got away from me." It didn't feel like the truth. It felt like something was being hidden, something big. After that visit to Luke's house in Brookridge, David and I left with more questions than answers. Luke had answered everything technically, but something was off. His eyes didn't match his words. It felt like talking to someone playing a version of themselves. David wanted to let it go. "People change," he said, but I couldn't. Not after seeing how isolated he was. Not after how cold the house felt emotionally and physically. Weeks passed. Then months. Luke didn't reach out again. We didn't see him online either. But one day, scrolling through social media, I noticed something strange. He had liked a few public posts from children's TV networks, Nickelodeon, old Disney shows, teen sitcoms. That wasn't unusual on its own. Lots of adults like nostalgic content. But Luke wasn't commenting like a nostalgic adult. His posts sounded like they were written by a child. Can't wait for the next episode. That scene made me laugh so hard. Something felt unnatural, almost performed. Still, I said nothing to David. I didn't want to sound paranoid. A year later, we heard Luke was back in Everpine, staying with his mom, who'd become ill. David thought maybe they'd reconnect, pick things up again. I reached out to Luke, asking if we could stop by while we were in town visiting my father. He hesitated, said he was still settling in, and didn't feel comfortable meeting just yet. Maybe next month. That made no sense. He was back in his childhood home, a place he'd lived for decades, and now he needed time to adjust? Something about his tone felt forced, avoidant. That night, David admitted something to me. I don't think he wants us around anymore. He looked sad, almost embarrassed, like he'd finally accepted that the friend he grew up with was gone. But what none of us realized was that Luke wasn't just avoiding us, he was hiding something. And soon, the whole country would know what it was. It happened 3 weeks before we were supposed to visit him. David called me downstairs. His face was pale. The TV was on the local news. A courtroom, headlines flashing, police footage. And then, they said the name, Luke. I didn't believe it at first. Thought it was a mistake, a look-alike. But then they showed his face, full name, clear as day. Luke had been arrested in connection with a massive child exploitation ring, one of the largest ever uncovered in the region. His name was among dozens obtained from a shut-down dark website. Hundreds of videos and images were found on devices in 2 homes. One of them was his mother's. The other was the house in Brook Ridge, the same house we visited, the one filled with wires, cluttered monitors, and cold, empty silence. David couldn't speak. He watched the report over and over, stunned, betrayed. They mentioned DNA matches, online records. His arrest was public. His sister had immediately removed his name from the property. His family, it seemed, didn't defend him. They just erased him. And we deleted every message, every photo, every trace. We didn't contact his mother. We didn't write him in prison. We didn't want answers anymore. There was nothing left to say. Luke was sentenced to over 30 years in prison. If he's ever released, he'll be monitored for life. David never recovered fully. He lost trust in people. He doesn't make new friends anymore. I don't blame him. Because if someone like Luke, someone you shared holidays with, trusted in your home, loved like family, could hide that kind of darkness, then who can you really trust? Some monsters don't hide in the dark. They sit at your table, smile across game boards, laugh at your jokes, and all the while, they're hiding everything.